Okay, let's now talk about the subject of trade confirmation. This is the next step in the securities trade life cycle. So just to ensure that we know where we are, we have enriched the trade and now we have a full body of the trade internally, but we still don't know for a fact that our counterparty has exactly the same details. And you may be thinking, well, how does that work then? Surely we agreed the details between our trader and the counterparty's trader up front. Yes, but if either of them, or maybe even both of them, capture some aspect of the detail of the skeleton incorrectly, then that will lead to a problem. So the purpose of the trade confirmation process is to try and identify whether we in fact agree or disagree with the details of the trade. So what is a trade confirmation? It's a formal advice of trading issued to the counterparty by us, or potentially received from the counterparty by us. What purpose does it serve? Well, it reduces our risk. If we issue a trade confirmation to a counterparty, then we are putting the onus on the counterparty to check the details of the trade and to respond to us if there is a problem with it. Now, time is a factor. If this is trade date and this is value date, the intended date of settlement, the further away that we get from trade date and the closer we get to value date, the greater the risk. So we could discover, if we're not careful, that after 2.5 days we've got the wrong price or the wrong quantity or the wrong security or the wrong counterparty, for example. Any aspect of the trade skeleton, it's possible that we have incorrectly recorded, unfortunately. From the investment bank's perspective, it advises clients. Now, we need to go back to make sure we understand the relationship between an investment bank and its clients. So the investment bank has two types of counterparty. So if this is the investment bank here, two types. One of them is other market professionals, right? So the investment bank is itself a market professional. It will trade with other market professionals. But the investment bank will also trade with clients, or institutional clients, has the same meaning. When an investment bank trades with a counterparty that is also an investment bank, they are on equal terms. When an investment bank, though, trades with a client, this is a non-equal relationship, because the party that has the power actually is the client. The client can pick and choose who they give their future business to. So if the investment bank doesn't perform to the required standards of the client, unfortunately, it would give the client the incentive, let's say, to not trade with you anymore, but to trade with some other bank instead. So servicing of clients is very important. Part of that service to clients is the issuance of trade confirmations very quickly after trade execution. Speed, though, is only one aspect. Accuracy is the other aspect that obviously is important. We would need to confirm details of trade with market professionals, so that will be that example there. And also it's a defence mechanism. Now, it's a defence mechanism in the sense that, given a choice of having executed a trade and not having issued a confirmation, well, you are exposed in case there's any differential between your details of the trade and the counterparty's detail. If you are proactive and issue a trade confirmation to the counterparty, the onus falls on them. What should you do then if you receive a trade confirmation? Answer: you should check it. If you fail, or if you make a conscious decision not to check an incoming confirmation received from a counterparty, you would be taking a risk, because if it transpires that actually we've got a wrong price or wrong quantity, wrong security, etc., if there's any loss that the counterparty incurs, unfortunately they would look to us in order to recompense them for that. So it's a very risky approach is to say, yes, I've received a trade confirmation. No, I'm not going to compare it to my internal details. So if you didn't issue a trade confirmation, you would jeopardise your relationship with institutional clients because they would perceive it as a lack of service. And also there are cases where there's a requirement to report the details of trade for trade matching purposes, that you could be fined actually by the regulatory authorities, regardless of whether you've actually successfully matched the trade or not, but just for issuing the detail of your trade beyond a deadline which the regulators quote. When should confirmations be issued? Well, as soon as possible after trade execution. Therefore, it's important for the trade to be captured by the trader immediately after trade execution. Time with everything we're discussing is a factor. If this is your trade date here and this is your value date here, the longer it takes to discover whether your details of the trade are accurate as far as the counterparty is concerned, the greater risk of ending up losing money, because you are at risk of not settling on the value date, which is the intended date of settlement. What different forms can trade confirmations be issued in? Well, when you've executed a trade with an institutional client, it's the institutional client that will tell you the medium by which you as an investment bank are required to transmit trade confirmations to them. This is the historic method issued by paper, and commonly the term that's used for that is a contract note, because actually what a trade confirmation is a contract. Let's say it represents the verbal contract that the two traders would have agreed to at trade execution. Historically, again, this is another method, telex, which would not be popularly used these days, but it's by use of telephone lines. Fax is a reasonably popular method for sending your counterparty a trade confirmation. And SWIFT. Let's just first of all say what SWIFT is. It is a mechanism for transmission of messages, and trade confirmation is one message type that SWIFT can be used for. But it requires subscription by both parties, the sender and the receiver. Okay, so what does SWIFT stand for then? I shall write this down. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. SWIFT. And SWIFT has been around for a good number of years now. Originally started as a mechanism for sending messages associated with payments and receipts of cash only. Later, SWIFT was upgraded to take account of messages associated with securities transactions. So for securities transactions, well, all messages have this structure to them. MT means message type, and if we're talking of securities, MT5 ... so 3 character numbers. So an MT 515 is a trade confirmation. So therefore, if an investment bank has executed a trade with a counterparty that is a subscriber to SWIFT. So just be clear, both parties need to subscribe to SWIFT, therefore it costs money. Then the investment bank would be able to transmit a SWIFT MT515 message, which is a SWIFT trade confirmation, to the counterparty. We'll be looking at other SWIFT message types as we go further through this module. Yet another method, though, is ETC, Electronic Trade Confirmation. So there are choices as to the mechanism by which you issue or receive trade confirmations. So what information is contained on a trade confirmation? So here is an example of an individual trade, and this contains not only the skeleton details but also the enriched details too, and I'll point those aspects out as we go through this. So if we are London brokers in London and we have traded with our counterparty, that's called AM Company in New York, we're sending a trade confirmation for the attention of the settlement department here. The subject is a trade confirmation. We've put our trade reference number on the trade confirmation. Now, why is that? Because if our counterparty receives this and they check it and they disagree the price, for example, or quantity, and they call us, the first thing that we want to know from them is what is our trade reference number. Don't forget, we will have thousands of trades which are not yet settled sitting in our operation system, in our books and records, and we need to know precisely which transaction the counterparty is referring to. So here we're saying as principal. Remember the choice is as principal or as agent. We confirm having bought. This is us buying on this trade date, the 7th of February, at this trade time, with this value date. That looks like 6 days. Is there a weekend in between? There might well be. Quantity is 10,000 of Siemens shares, the German company. Here is the unique identifier of that security. This is an ISIN code, International Securities Identification Number. The price, because it's an equity, right, is a unit price. This is not a percentage price, as would be the case of a bond. What do the cash values of the trade look like then? Well, the principal figure in this example is simply number of shares multiplied by the price per share, so 31.6 million euros. And for simplicity, there's no charges applicable to this. There's no equivalent of stamp duty or SEC fee. Okay, so the things that were enriched, well, this could be enriched. This information here is typically all enriched as well. In other words, it's been added to over and above what was on the skeleton details of the trade. So what this is saying, if I take the third and fourth rows here, our depot, our nostro, the word depot is a nickname for the place that we require securities to be delivered into. Are we buying or selling? We are buying, so we would obviously expect to receive the securities. The use of the term depot is saying where we require delivery to. And we're saying here it's to this custodian of ours, and here is the account number. If we look at it from the place of where it's got our nostro, the word nostro refers to cash. So this means we'll be paying out of our cash account number this. As you can see, these two are the same actual account number. And that's important when we look at settlement basis, which we'll come on to. So this information has been enriched from static data, from our own SSIs. And this information, which is where we say your depot, your nostro, that's talking to the counterparty here. So what this is saying is, based upon the information that we are holding in our static data that you provided us with previously, this is the way that we intend to settle this trade. And so again, both the depot and the nostro, the securities account and the cash account of the counterparty, we've extracted from static data, and hopefully the counterparty will agree with that. If they don't agree with it, it maybe would have meant that they've changed their account, their custodian account, and they've failed to inform us. That wouldn't be our problem, by the way, if that is the case. So assuming this to be correct, then the next question is, how do we want to settle this? Answer in the normal way: delivery versus payment, simultaneous, risk-free exchange of securities for cash. Further notices then, please notify us within 24 hours if you disagree with any of the above. We're saying that we've executed this trade under the rules of the particular body, the ICMA here. We're saying that we are members of ICMA and who we're regulated by. And we've got a clear statement of the date and the time at which this trade confirmation has been issued. Now, is that important? Yes, because in the event of a dispute between us and the counterparty on any aspect of the trade, we want to be seen that we have issued this trade confirmation. We're saying at 10:22. What was the trade time? 9:59. So that's 23 minutes only have elapsed, and that, I would suggest, is very good in terms of if you can issue a trade confirmation in that kind of time frame, providing you're happy with the accuracy of it as far as you can tell. That's a very good situation to be in. So let's assume that we issue that by whichever form that we mentioned on the previous page, and then the onus will be on the counterparty to check it and inform us if they disagree. The odd thing is, and what is common practice, which I regard as a weakness in this respect, is that if once we've sent this, an AM company receives it, compares it with their own books and records and agrees it, they don't let us know that they agree it. We have to assume, because we haven't heard anything to the contrary, that they have agreed it, which is a bit of a weakness. That's not quite as strong as saying we know for a fact that the counterparty agrees. Okay, so moving on. What is electronic trade confirmation? It's a facility that's made available, or is a requirement, a regulatory requirement in some cases, that regulators or market authorities impose upon the members of that community. It may be applicable to only the market professional community, in other words, only the investment banks and brokers. It's likely to be mandatory in that you are obliged to comply with what they're asking you to do, and there may be a deadline. Otherwise, a fine may be imposed. So let's assume that to be the case. Here is an example of electronic trade matching. Now here we've got two examples of investment banks, Morgan Stanley and UBS. Let's assume they execute a trade between them. Internally, in each house, they would then capture the details of the trade, and then they need to send the detail of the trade, so at stage 2 for both parties, to this trade matching facility. What this facility will do then is they make a comparison of the two, and therefore attempt to match. And do they match? Well, the answer is either they match or they are unmatched, and that status will then be applied to the trade and sent back to each of the parties. Now, clearly, what both parties would want is that the status is matched. If it's unmatched, this means that there is some form of discrepancy, some break between the two versions of the transaction. It could be a price difference. It could be a quantity difference. It could be that the security itself is different. It could be that both of them are saying that they are buying, or both are saying that they're selling. Well, clearly that is not valid. So they need to. So if you're UBS, for example, and you received an unmatched status back, then you would need to go through a certain series of stages. But ultimately, you need it to be matched. So what would you do if you received an unmatched status? Well, one step is to pick up the phone to the counterparty and talk to them and see if they intend changing. The answer might be yes, in which case UBS needs to do nothing. Hopefully what will happen then when they change, they will resubmit their trade details, and then hopefully it will match. If they say, no, we think that we are, if Morgan Stanley says that they are right, then UBS would potentially need to make a change, which means that the person that's responsible for this within UBS would need to potentially talk to the trader internally, and the trader might say, yeah, sorry, I booked it at the wrong price, in which case the trade would need to be amended in the front office, come down the interface into the back, and go through the same process again. So in some cases, this electronic trade matching, I've seen a case where actually it is a market-wide requirement, but only for the market professional community, and 30-minute trade reporting. Each trade detail must be received by the trade matching facility within 30 minutes of trade execution. Otherwise, the market authority will fine you simply for being late. Even if your trade matches perfectly at 38 minutes, you'll still be fined if you sent it at 31 minutes past the point of trade execution. So that's one example of electronic trade matching. But here's another example. Through a facility called OASIS, which stands for Order Allocation System. Order Allocation System. So this is another form of ETC, electronic trade confirmation, but this time it's called trade affirmation. Now what does this mean? It means it's a sequential series of steps, whereas on the previous page that was not sequential.